Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Frank Gore Jr., Southern Miss Golden Eagles, and you listen to Fun Belt Podcast, Southern Miss to the top.
If you didn't know before, now you know why they call this the Fun Belt.
Very excited about the Sun Belt.
You know, while other conferences have been breaking up, our conference has become stronger.
The state of Sun Belt football is the strongest in our history.
I saw Fun Belt Conference, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I got to join the show. It sounds a lot of fun.
He did amazing. That was my first time actually seeing him in action, and he's real. I like him.
Fun Belt Podcast, part of the Believe Network. Arkansas State true freshman quarterback Jalen Raynor with his words for fellow true freshman Blake Murphy of ULM. Blake Murphy got the statistical win going for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. But Jalen Raynor got the win once again as Arkansas State ran the series up to 14 straight over ULM. Dusty Thibodeaux of Warhawk Report. Shane Mettlen of Daily News Record. Jeremy, still drunk, I think, celebrating that win once again. Shane, welcome in, though. You're not drunk and celebrating, even though James Madison did get a big win under your watch.
Yeah, we'll say I'm not drunk. We'll pretend like I'm not drunk. No, but yeah, I mean, are those the two? Are those the? Is that the future of the Sun Belt we just listened to talking about? You know, the 2 freshman quarterbacks.
You know, there was a lot of talk about that after the game of how much longer are these guys going to be around. And I talked with a couple guys from Arkansas State. They seem to think that he'll be there maybe next year, but then the year after that, it'll be poaching season, and he'll be moving on to greener pastures. Blake Murphy, you got to think that as long as Otis Mounds and offensive coordinator Matt Kubik are still on the Bayou, that he is there as well, and not longing to return to South Florida, where he hails from, that he will be on the Bayou a little bit longer. At least we hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, the possibility. It's always in the back of everybody's mind. But there are guys who stay. I mean, let's just rule out anybody who plays well as a youngster that they're definitely heading out. I mean, we're on year 5 of Grayson McCall, right? When we were talking about.
Tried. Yeah, he tried to leave.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes things go that way. I mean, but there was articles about, is he going to go pro? It seems like 4 years ago, and he's still there. So who knows?
And I guess the same could be said also for Frank Gore Jr. there at Southern Miss. Obviously with his dad, he has the pedigree. He has the inside knowledge of what it takes to get to the next level. I think everyone's thought that this was the year that he was going to go pro, meaning his sophomore year, his junior year, and now obviously after his senior year. I'm glad these guys kind of stick around. And, I think a lot of times these guys maybe see the writing on the wall that, especially with NIL, this money they're making at their school is probably more than they're going to make when they're signed to a practice squad or even that rookie contract going into the professional leagues.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you can never, I mean, this is like the sentimental old guy talk, but you can never go back to college as much as we all want to. I mean, you make that decision and then it's done. And if things don't work out for you, it's like I said, it's done. And, it's not a huge risk now in the NIL days if you're a star player to stay where you're at. You're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, you just got to hope you're taking full advantage of it. We talked previously with the Ultra program there at Louisiana Lafayette. Great program that really teaches these kids how to invest the money, how to make the most of the time that they have doing NIL. So you got to hope that more schools in the Sun Belt are kind of picking up on that and kind of modeling that same type of program.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you hope if you want to see good players in this conference. I mean, that's what it's going to take. I think everybody's getting on board with NIL at this point, but it's sort of trial and error. And, there's some guys that are just, either need the money or want the money and are going to jump if that big offer is there. But, I mean, there are other guys who just like where they are, like their teammates, maybe take a little bit less to stay at a program where they feel comfortable.
We look back on the week, a program that I think we were all pretty comfortable with picking to win the Sun Belt Conference West, the Troy Trojans. They went down to Texas State, able to get the 31-13 win. I think it was 4 turnovers there for TJ Finley himself. It was not a good night to be a Bobcat, that's for sure. On their homecoming night, Gunnar Watson throws for nearly 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Is there anybody in the West that can really stop Troy?
I'm not sure at this point. I mean, we thought that South Alabama matched up with them in the preseason, and then we just don't know what's going to happen with South Alabama. Now we don't know what's going to happen with Carter Bradley and South Alabama this week. I wouldn't pick against Troy the rest of the way, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, you have the Thursday night matchup this week for the belt, South Alabama, Troy, without Carter Bradley being in there. You've got to think that really changes the whole dynamic of that game, not really knowing what there is behind Carter Bradley. But then Troy, if they can get past South Alabama, they go to ULM. That should be a win for the Trojans there. Host the Raging Cajuns, and then on the road again to close out the season at Southern Miss. I think really, ULM is always a tough place to play. You never know what's going to happen with the Cajuns. But for the most part, it looks like Troy's going to do what it takes and just enough to win the West.
Yeah, I really think they will. That Louisiana game, I think, is dangerous, but Troy does not lose at home very often. And, if that was in Lafayette, I might be looking at it a little bit differently, but I really think it'll be an upset if Troy doesn't win out here.
With that said, the Cajuns did pick up a big road win this past weekend going to Mobile, winning over South Alabama 33-30. As we said, Carter Bradley left the game injured, did have 381 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. LaDamian Webb, 96 yards and a touchdown, but it was once again the offense behind Zion Chris and Jacob Thibodeaux of the Cajuns. Chris, 145, 2 touchdowns. Thibodeaux, 119 and 1 touchdown. This Cajuns offense, I feel like, is sneaky good, that they don't look like they're really doing what it takes, but they're doing enough to win the games.
Yeah, and we're talking about South Alabama losing Carter Bradley, but he was in there long enough, like you said, to almost throw for 400 yards. And Louisiana jumped on him early. I mean, this wasn't a Carter Bradley gets hurt, so Louisiana wins. Like the Cajuns were, they jumped on him early. They were up 20-7. Like they just legitimately won that game. And, I think, if there's a team that can take down Troy in the West, I think it's the Cajuns right now.
Is it too much of a jump to conclusions to see that South Alabama had 5 turnovers leading to 13 points? That was the difference? Was the fumbles that South Alabama had, the 2 picks there that Carter Bradley had? Is it safe to say that literally the Jags turned the game over to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, turnovers, that'll do it, right? I mean, you turn the ball over that much, that often, it's going to be really hard to win. And, not to say that Louisiana doesn't have something to do with those plays happening, but that's what's made it so hard to pick a South Alabama game this year is when they're not making mistakes, they're capable of putting 55 points up on people. And when they are, it's trouble.
Don't bring up the pass, Shane. Don't bring it up. A game that I think it went pretty much exactly how we thought it was going to. Coastal Carolina, Marshall. Coastal Carolina rolls 34-6. Jared Guest came in, filled the shoes of Grayson McCall, who was out injured. But really, I think that overall, Coastal Carolina was the less beat-up team, and it really showed. Cam Fancher, only 125 yards, 22 passing attempts. We got to see the future, though, with Cole Pennington coming in and throwing 12 of 23 for 77 yards. Rashida Lee tried to make a comeback, only 52 yards on the ground. There just wasn't a whole lot going on for the Herd. And at the same time, it seemed like everybody was rallying behind Guest, and the shots just kept on rolling.
Yeah, I mean, Guest obviously filled in magnificently for Grayson McCall. And we talked about it last week. Marshall is just beat up at this point in the season. It's a team that you see them play and they just look like they're limping around and not. I mean, everybody's missing guys at this point in the season, but for Marshall, it's just a different kind of look of a team that their people are out there, but they just don't look like they're capable of playing at 100% right now. And it's tough. It's tough for Marshall these days.
Your crazy stat out of that game, Marshall collectively 283 yards, Jared Guest 289 passing yards. He himself beat the herd.
Yeah, and we've talked. Obviously, Grayson McCall was rounding out and coming along in this new system before he got hurt. But we talked about, if the system was made for Grayson McCall, maybe the system is made for Jared Guest. He comes in there and does a really nice job right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely shows that it's more of what the Trickett is doing on the offensive side than anything else, and maybe that Tim Beck kind of knows what he's doing there, and it's not just the Grayson McCall show.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at Coastal's quarterback situation, Guest does well. They've got a Power 5 transfer behind him, and Ethan Vasco, who at one point was committed to ODU. So I mean, I think the future and the present at quarterback for Coastal looks a lot better than it did just a few weeks ago.
Great game to 3 quarters, and then there was the fourth. Arkansas State rallied off 17 points in the fourth quarter, 24 points unanswered until Warhawks got a late touchdown and 2-point conversion to get the 34-24 victory over ULM. Look, Blake Murphy looked fantastic behind center for the Warhawks. Bugs Mortimer showcased what he could do at the receiver position. He's a young guy, only a sophomore, so that could be a very good tandem for a long time coming. But the Warhawks just did not really have a whole lot else going on other than that, unable to really make the adjustments in the second half to contain Corey Rucker and Jalen Raynor as the Red Wolves just really kind of rolled in that game.
Yeah, it seems like it's turning into a season you just want to forget for your Warhawks at this point, where they were so close so often early in the season, and it's just kind of getting away from them at this point. I mean, the silver lining might be finding a freshman quarterback that you can hopefully build around if you can keep him around for a while.
Yeah, that's what you really got to hope for. And you got to hope this team just doesn't just lay down and roll over, that they keep fighting. They do have Southern Miss this week. They're having their struggles of their own. So you got to hope that going on the road, getting away from the noise, maybe at home, that you're able to kind of get right with a good road win and a conference win. But if not, it's going to be a long season knowing that you have Southern Miss, you have Troy, you have Old Miss, and then the Cajuns to close out the season.
Yeah, it's a must win for the Warhawks this coming week. I mean, don't you think? Like you said, you're staring at Troy and Ole Miss the 2 weeks after that. If you don't get this one, it could get ugly pretty fast.
Shane, I'm going to throw a good conspiracy theory out to you.
Okay.
What if the Warhawks can rattle off 3 of the 4 final games for a win, get to 5-7, and they are the team picked for a bowl over JMU, who goes 12-0?
We were discussing that scenario on Saturday, but substituting ODU for ULM. But I mean, it could be a variety of Sun Belt teams, right? That maybe get that last bowl spot that keeps JMU out of it.
For sure. I'd love to see it be Southern Miss run the table, and Will Hall just gets to give everybody the golden eagle and show the mustard buzzards that he still got it, and that Southern Miss to the top as they roll on to a bowl game.
I think they're 1-7 though. I think they're out of it.
5-7, baby.
Yeah,
5-7. It's the new 6-6.
Okay.
In the modern day hate, we had Georgia Southern, Georgia State. Georgia Southern rolled 44-23. I don't even think it was really that close of a game. I really feel like the Eagles just kind of dominated this game from end to end. Davis Brin did Davis Brin things, only not with the interceptions, throwing 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick for good measure. And Darren Granger, he didn't do Darren Granger things, only 157 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. It was an ugly game for the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, Granger did do the Granger things to some degree, having 80 yards on the ground, but the 2 picks were very costly. I mean, especially at a time where it looked like Georgia State might be able to kind of get back into it. And when one of those picks comes, and that one ended up kind of, just completely turning the tide of the game.
Yeah, and then Marcus Carroll did get 208 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. I forget if it was you or Jeremy that talked about him possibly being the surprise running back of the season. I wasn't big on that sentiment, but, he's kind of growing on me. I really think that he might be kind of that sleeper back in the league. Yeah,
I mean, I think we were both pretty high on him after the season opener, but Jeremy was the one who said that. And, you're looking at a guy who's right up there with the is he leading the nation, or is he just up? He's among the leaders in the nation and rushing at this point.
He is second.
Yeah.
He's about 27 yards behind Ollie Gordon of Oklahoma State, roughly 70 yards ahead of Kamani Vidal.
Yeah. So I think he was the nation's leader for a few days, but then the Saturday games rolled around.
I wish I was the leading rusher for a couple days.
Yeah, I'd take it.
Yeah. Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, Southern Miss dominated the game against App State until the very end, where the Mountaineers were able to come from behind for a 10-point victory, saving Sean Clark and everything else going on in Boone, North Carolina. Joey Aguilar, 391, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. They had 20 points in the fourth quarter for the come from behind victory. Shane, did you see any of that game?
I didn't see any of it, but following scores and discussions of that one, it was, I mean, the calls for Sean Clark's head in the first half of that game were loud and and frequent coming out of Boone. Things changed a little bit in the second half. They figured out to win. We finally saw the Frank Gore game we thought we were going to see several times this year, with him putting up 247 yards on the ground. Like, we finally saw the Frank Gore. We finally saw the Southern Miss offense we kind of expected, but they just couldn't get it done once again.
Mountaineers sit at 4-4, 2-2 in the Sun Belt. A remaining schedule of Marshall this coming week, trips to Georgia State and James Madison, and then hosting Georgia Southern. It's possibly doable that they could hit the 6-win mark, maybe even touch the 7-win mark there. Do you think that that's a reasonable feat for the Mountaineers, or do you feel that they've been flashes in the pan and they're going to struggle to even get win number 5?
I think 6 wins, maybe even 7, is doable. I mean, you look, the East is just so jumbled right now. Like, JMU separated themselves a little bit, obviously, but it seems like anybody else can beat anybody in a given week. Marshall's going to go into that game against App State in the same boat that App State was in going in against Southern Miss. And, which one of those teams kind of gets the much needed victory next week? Because they're both, at least if you're App State, you gained a little bit of momentum going into that one. That'd been kind of the ugly bowl next week if App State hadn't been able to pull something out and beat a very much struggling Southern Miss team.
Without a doubt. Closing out the weekend, the game you were at, the darlings of college football, the top 25, James Madison Dukes taking on Old Dominion. I told you it was going to be a close game there, Shane, and it was, with the Dukes squeaking out a 30-27 lead What'd you see from that home contest there for the Dukes?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't JMU's best performance, but I think that's what ODU does to teams is, they take you out of your comfort zone, they spread you out, they make your defense do things you're not used to doing, and they've got, some playmakers on defense who, they almost had a pick six to start the game. They only got 3 points out of that. That ended up being huge that they only got 3 points out of that play. And, that's ODU. They make you uncomfortable and they make some big plays and they stay in games that maybe they really shouldn't stay in games. If you just look at, the tail of the tape with those teams, JMU, I'm not saying the 20-point spread was legit, but JMU, I think, probably should have been able to win that one by a couple scores if you just look at the Jimmies and the Joes on each side.
I stand by my statement that Old Dominion, I love the Monarchs, but they are clunky. They're weird, but it works. and I think that shows even in that loss. I know that we don't want to have the FCS mentality, as Jeremy would say, and pour one out for the close loss. But I feel like that they really showcased some skill and some talent there. This Old Dominion team is not dead. I see them still plugging along and getting at least 2 more wins on the season before we call it quits.
Yeah, and I think, if you're an ODU fan, I'd be looking at the future too. They bring in a new offensive coordinator with a completely new system. They're spreading the field like this, but they're doing it with, let's be honest, they're doing it with an FCS backup quarterback. The guy who scored a 58-yard touchdown for them was, a track star who didn't get a scholarship offer from anybody else for football last spring in the portal. What is ODU going to do when they start bringing in like legit Sun Belt recruits at the skill positions to run this offense? I think it's a little bit scary for the rest of the East to think about that.
Peeking ahead, they do have Coastal Carolina this week. That was a team that went into Myrtle Beach and got the win last year. Can they do it again at home this year without looking ahead to the Liberty game in 2 weeks from now? I think that Old Dominion is going to have their hands full, but I think that they could possibly pull out the win this week over the Chants. But that'll put them 1 game closer to being bowl eligible. What do you think there as we come down the stretch? Who's going to legitimately, Shane, we know who's going to win the East. Who's legitimately going to win the East?
I have no idea at this point. I mean, Georgia Southern obviously has a leg up on people, but you look at Georgia State, App State, Coastal, the advantage they have right now is they still get to play JMU. And I posted this the other day. If only one team in the East beats JMU, it counts for 2 wins, essentially, because all of your competitors took a loss against a team that's not really in the standings. And, you get a victory against that team, it basically bumps you up 2 games in the standings. So there's a golden opportunity for one of those teams to really make a jump in a really packed race.
Yeah, the only team in the East that I really see as dead, that I just don't see being able to pull it off, is Marshall, sitting at 1-3 right now in conference action. I mean, maybe if they ran the tables and happened to beat and play everyone else, but I don't think that is the case. So I don't see where they're going to be able to win the East. Everyone else, I think App State's kind of the dark horse. Old Dominion, Coastal, Georgia State, all sitting at 3-2, Georgia Southern 3-1, and then of course James Madison at the top, ineligible this upcoming year. But as you said, everyone's still got to play James Madison. I'll get it right eventually. So when we look at the West, is it as clear cut as we think it is, that it's Troy's to lose, sitting at 3-1 with it seemingly everyone else at 2-2, and then ULM Southern Miss 0-5? They're pretty much out of the running.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, the fact that they get Louisiana at home, I think, just makes it theirs to lose. If they had to go to Lafayette, I might look at it as, more of a toss-up. But, I would be surprised if they lose another game at this point. But the one to keep an eye on, I think, is definitely Lafayette going to. You got me saying Lafayette instead of Louisiana, but that game there, in Troy, I think that's the deciding game for the Sun Belt West.
Always love these kind of unofficial semifinalist games there, and good for Coach DeZormo, able to take that program and really kind of make it his own and showcase that he was the right guy, the right hire, and able to get the Cajuns back atop the Sun Belt West. Good for him.
Yeah.
Any team kind of stand out to you, or any player stand out to you over this past weekend?
I think, I just called him an FCS backup, but Grant Wilson for ODU, seeing him in person impressed me more at quarterback. I think he impressed Kurt Signetti more at quarterback than maybe anybody was expecting. Kind of expected a game manager, and he whipped it around a little bit. On the other side of that, just talking about the game I saw, Jalen Green just continues to be absolutely dominant on the defensive line. Incredible what he's doing. But beyond that, I mean, we talk about the young quarterbacks too. We talked about Arkansas State. We talked about ULM. We briefly mentioned Joey Aguilar, but give it up for all of those guys, like getting the job done at quarterback, getting thrown to the fire as in their first years.
Yeah, I think my salute this week is going to be to Jared Guest, senior quarterback there at Coastal Carolina, steps in for Grayson McCall. He had to hear it all week long of Grayson McCall's backup. It's McCall's team. Didn't matter. He stepped in, 289, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Led him to really kind of the blowout win there to keep him in the mix of things in the Sun Belt Conference East. I think that was the guy that I really liked the most on the offensive side of the ball. I'd also mention Corey Rucker, the receiver there at Arkansas State. Know that he has a true freshman receiver there of Jalen Raynard. You wouldn't know it. They have great connection and are able to really make plays happen for the Red Wolves.
Yeah, Guest is a great choice, I think, especially when you consider he got thrown into the situation last year and he didn't deliver. So it's showing a little fortitude to come back this season and perform that much better in the same kind of scenario.
Performing the same type of scenario again, though, Shane. Give us your plug promo parting shot.
Let's just plug dnronline.com/sports. And, you can read all about James Madison especially, but Sunbelt football in general, and soon to be Sunbelt basketball and probably soccer tournaments and everything else. We'll have stuff online for a lot of sports.
I'm going to take a parting shot, and I'll hear from the commissioner's office on it, and that's fine. Shane, do you think you could run up and down the football field like as an official?
Probably not. Not this time.
So with that said, if you couldn't efficiently get up and down the field, would you still feel obligated that you had to put on the stripes and call up a collegiate game?
No.
No, you wouldn't call the game, or no, you wouldn't give up the stripes?
I wouldn't feel obligated to continue to do that, especially now we see a lot of those guys who are getting up there in age. They can move to the replay booth.
Yeah, but, I saw an official at a recent college game. I will say this. The guy couldn't even get up and down the field. And yet, his calls helped take 21 points off of the scoreboard for one of the teams that I happen to see.
How the hell you be talking about?
How the hell do you have the right to officiate a game if you can't even get up and down the field? My fat ass almost could, but I would know that that's my limitation, that I'm not going to be able to go up and down the field, so I'm not going to be an official. Know your limitations, Shane. That's the point of my story.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
I'm glad you could read between the lines. And hopefully we get Jeremy back soon so that we can get him grounded from a 14-game winning streak.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that.